not cover every detail of Luke chapter 11. And I know for a fact we're not going to cover every detail of chapter 12 just because I don't understand every detail of chapter 12. But we're going to finish Daniel tonight, Lord willing. Next week we'll start into the Pentateuch, book of Leviticus, but I don't think I'm going to strictly only teach Leviticus because sometimes it's better to study Deuteronomy when you're studying Leviticus to understand one when you understand the other. Leviticus being the first giving and Deuteronomy the second giving of the law. Sometimes you need both to understand some things. So we'll probably be in Deutero-Leviticus starting next week. I'm going to go back, if you don't mind, a couple slides. Thank you. That'll be perfect right there. We're starting at verse 25 tonight. Daniel chapter 11, verse 25. Sorry, my Bible had made its way to Isaiah. It still thinks it's on Sunday. All right, Daniel chapter 11, verse 25. And as long as time allows, I'll continue consulting Brother Maganos' work, but we will go ahead and keep moving quicker this week. We'll read the text, look at the PowerPoint, and then look at this book. Beginning in verse 25, "And he shall stir up his power and his heart against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall wage war with an exceeding great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for plot shall be devised against him." I'm going to go ahead and finish the paragraph. Let's go through 28. "Even those who eat his food shall break him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. And as for the two kings, their hearts shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail, for the end is yet to be at the time appointed. And he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant. And he shall work his work and return to his own land." All right, we're going to read 25, 26, and we read all the way to 28, 27, 28. So we'll cover these 3 points right here. So 25, 26 in the north, we have Antiochus IV, which is who we're going to have the rest of the chapter. And I'm going to present to you 1, 2, 3. I'm going to present to you 4 different views of chapter 12. My view is it's probably Antiochus IV in chapter 12 also. So Antiochus IV is who is going to be from verse 20, I think 20, yeah. And 21 through the end of chapter 12 is one of the views. Let's read from the commentary, verse 25. "In 170 BC, an Egyptian army set off to recapture Palestine. Antiochus defeated this army, entered Egypt, took Ptolemy VI as prisoner, and occupied much of Egypt." First Maccabees chapter 1, verses 17 to 19 tell about it. It says, "So he invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots and elephants and cavalry, and with a large fleet. He engaged Ptolemy, king of Egypt, in battle, and Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many were wounded and fell. And they captured the fortified cities in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land." That's verses 25 and 26. Now, verse 27, Ptolemy VI has been taken prisoner. In 27, the 2 countries are going to unite as one. And why do you think Ptolemy VI would be willing to unite the 2 countries? Yeah, probably to save his life. If you're a prisoner, you might be willing to do quite a few things, including turn on your own country and do what it takes to save your own life. Let's read. Antiochus IV and Ptolemy VI will unite. Notice in verse 27 it says, two kings, their hearts shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail. So what is verse 27 implying about their unity? It's not true unity. They're sitting at the same table lying to each other. I want the best for your country. I want the best for your country. Let's work together. And they're just lying. The plan was Antiochus put Ptolemy VI back in as king for him to be the puppet king, to where he could control both kingdoms. And so he thought, this is great. I'll just restore him to his kingdom, but he'll get to do everything I say, and I'll actually be in control of both kingdoms. And verse 28. In 28, we still have Antiochus IV being described here. It says, he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant. Now, I've named things, especially earlier in chapters. Can you remember some of the wicked things Antiochus IV did to God's city, temple, people? What did he do on the altar? He sacrificed a pig on the altar. What did he do in the temple? He set up an altar to Zeus, if I remember right. He even took and would kill people and put their bones on God's altar and burn them that way. Let me read to you. So this breaking the holy covenant, God had made a covenant with his people, and Antiochus wants to make them break that covenant. Here's what 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 21 to 23 says. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary, took the golden altar, the lampstand for its light, all its utensils. He also took the table for the bread of the presence, the cups for the drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, the gold decorations on the front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He took all that was hidden treasures which he found. So he just ransacks God's temple. He takes everything he can find. And that was predicted in verse 28. And he shall work his will and return to his own land. So he goes in, he mistreats God's land, mistreats God's temple, and then just takes it all with him and goes back home. Exactly what was predicted by Daniel, by God. Any comments there before we go to the next paragraph? We're in Daniel chapter 11, verse 29. The teens all got to come to our class tonight, so catching them up where we're at. All right, verse 29 to 30. Oh, sorry. The more important book. At that time appointed he shall return and come into the south, but it shall not be this time as it was before. For ships of... Okay, so who have we just been talking about? Antiochus the Fourth is going to come back into the kingdom that's not his, the kingdom of the south, but it's not going to be as before. Last time when he came in, he just whooped them. He had no problem fighting them and taking their king as prisoner. He's going to come back, but what's going to stop him in verse 30? Ships. Ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged, and take action against the holy covenant. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the holy covenant. All right. Exactly as predicted, happens in history. Antiochus IV, but he gets to deal with a Roman council that is fighting against him. Let's read from history. In the meantime, this was 29. In the meantime, the two Ptolemies, the sixth and the seventh, agreed to join together. So in 168, Antiochus invaded again. But the Roman consul Gaius Popilius Lanius, the ships of the western coastlands will oppose him, or ESV, the ships of Kittim will oppose him, intercepted Antiochus and ordered him out of Egypt. They beat him so bad that they captured him, they drew a circle around him, and they ordered him that he had to decide what he was going to do before he stepped out of the circle or they'd kill him. And then he left. So he was able just to run back and forth, north to south, and conquer throughout all of his reign until the Romans decide to get involved and protect the south from him. So he goes over there to attack the south, and when he goes to attack Egypt, which is the south, the Romans step in and stop him, and he's no longer able to throw around his power like he used to. Now, what does it imply at the end of verse 30? We haven't got to that yet. Yep. So he gets whooped. He goes to fight this battle. The Egyptians, he thinks he's just going to be able to take over the Egyptians. The Romans step in and stop him, draw a circle around him, and threaten his life. And so on his way home, he decides he's going to beat up on the Jews, on God's people again. So if you ever wonder as we're reading through this chapter, other than showing that God is real, that His Word is inspired, that prophecy is true, why do we need this chapter? Because it constantly has to do with the Jews. They're going back and forth through God's people's land. And if you were a Jewish person who believed God's Word and believed prophecy, and you could read it hundreds of years later, and you're going through this hardship of persecution, it helps you get through to know God already told us this was going to happen. God's in control, just like the book of Revelation was to Christians. It helps you get through the hardship to know God has already predicted these things. 30b to 31 starts talking about these wicked things he does to the Jews. Profanes the temple, the fortress, takes away the regular burnt offering, shall set up abomination that makes desolate. Y'all have probably heard the phrase abomination of desolation before. A lot of times our friends in the denominational world throw that out like it's something that you need to watch out for, and when it happens, you know Jesus is about to come back. The abomination of desolation that's happening here is what he did to the temple and what he did to their worship. Let me read you some history. There was a rumor, he went off to Egypt and he fought this battle, and who beats him? The Romans. There was this rumor that while he was there, he got killed. And so some people take advantage of this, thinking it's true, and they decide to start their own kingdom. And they go to Jerusalem, they lead a rebellion, and Antiochus comes back through town, and they're not expecting him to be alive. And so when he gets back in town and finds people think they are free from him and have made their own king and their own ruler, how is he going to react? He is furious, and he takes it out on all of God's people. Here's what 2 Maccabees says. When news of what happened reached the king, he took it to mean that Judea was in revolt. So raging inwardly, he left Egypt, took the city by storm. He commanded his soldiers to cut down relentlessly everyone they met, to slay those who went into the houses. And there was killing of young and old, destruction of boys, women, and children, slaughter of virgins and infants. Within the total of 3 days, 80,000 were destroyed, 40,000 in hand-to-hand fighting, and as many also were sold into slavery. So he hears that they are in rebellion, which is partly true but partly not true. They thought he was dead. And so they had set up their own leadership and everything. And then he comes back through town, and he's furious, and he just slaughters men, women, and children. 80,000. 40,000 people. 40,000 killed hand-to-hand, 40,000 taken as slaves in 3 days. Jerusalem is decimated. But then, that's horrid. But that's not really what our focus of the passage is on. It's about the spirituality, right? So let's read about that. He stopped the daily sacrifices. The abomination was he erected an altar, and I believe in my memory from other studies it was to Zeus, in the temple. So he erected his own altar to worship his own God in God's temple, and stopped them from offering any sacrifices daily to God. I'm promising I'm going to go faster. It just hasn't happened yet. That clock is going faster, though. All right. He shall seduce with flattery, verse 32, those who violate the covenant. Without knowing any history, what does that mean? He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant. What does that mean? He's going to say all kinds of nice things to you if you're willing to break God's word. If you're willing to break your covenant with God, you're going to be his best friend. But the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action, and the wise among the people shall make many understand. Though for some days they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder. So, are everybody going to give in to him? No. There will be a remnant that are going to stand up for God, but what is he going to do to them in verse 33? Kill them, hurt them. Captivity. Verse 34, when they stumble, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join themselves to them with flattery. So this is kind of interesting. The group of rebels who join themselves to God's people actually is growing, but what does that tell us in verse 34 at the end of it? They're joining themselves with what? Hypocrisy. Yeah. So, in other words, God's people are being persecuted and killed for continuing to follow God, and they start getting a following. People decide, we're going to join this movement, but they're not joining it for the right reasons. They're doing it in hypocrisy. So, you've got two choices here. Join the king, and you can live. Join the religious movement, and you can die. But even amongst that, some people join the religious movement for the wrong reasons. What do you think might be a hypocritical reason to join the religious movement? What, I mean, if you could lose your life to join this movement, why would you join it if it's not for God? What do you think? To dethrone the king. I don't have that in history. That's what I was thinking too. You know, you're joining it for politics, not for religion. And so you're willing to die because you want him gone, not because you want God as king. Okay, let's go see if we got some history, though, here to match this. That was verses, we got through, what verse did we leave off at? 34, let's finish the paragraph then. 35, and some of the wise shall stumble. Now go back to verse 33 if you need a definition of stumbling. Stumbling was being killed for your faith. So some of the wise shall stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, made white until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. In other words, some people that are actually following God for the right reasons will be killed, but God's purifying. He's making his people better when you choose the right things, even if you lose your life for it. All right, let's look at the history of that, 31 to 35. In verse 32, it talked about how some people were following after Antiochus. He seduced them. There was a group that was called Menelaus and his followers. And whatever the tyrant wanted, they said was good. If he ransacked the temple, good. If he mistreated worship, good. They said, they flattered him. Whatever he wanted to hear, they said, whatever you're doing is good. Instead of sticking to God's word. Verse 33 and 34, God's people will endure sword, 1 Maccabees 2, fire, 2 Maccabees 6, captivity, 1 Maccabees 3, plunder, 1 Maccabees 1. The people of God were persecuted throughout this whole time period, and the worst persecution that happened was under this one man, Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Verse 35, the persecution, though, has a purpose. What was that purpose according to Daniel? What happens when God's people are persecuted in verse 35? They're made white. They're purified. We're becoming better through difficulty. Do you remember Jesus tell some parables like this? Like about how you have to remove certain things and then you can become better. Can you think of one of those type of parables? What about the time where he talks about fire? What about, was it James also that has a parable about fire? That you put a house through fire and you, or is that Peter, 2 Peter? It talks about a house that's put through fire and you see what it was made out of. Persecution and difficulty for the Christian is not, it's tough, but it's not a bad thing in God's eyes because it makes the righteous more righteous. And that's right. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We haven't faced a ton of that in our lifetime, but one little test that we got to go through was called COVID. And I'm sure this eldership or this congregation has went through other tests of false teachers, and you stood up, and what didn't kill you made you stronger. And that's just two big examples, but there's little examples year by year and month by month that the congregation, the elders have hardships that come, and when we react well and get through those, we actually become better as a congregation. Verse 36, and the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. Now this is the worst part about him. I keep saying that about everything. He did a lot of bad. But one of the worst things about him is he called himself Epiphanes. That's the title he called himself. That's what we call him. But the word Epiphanes means he's calling himself God. So he was calling himself, I'm Antiochus, who is a god. He shall magnify himself above every god and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods, the one true and living God. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished, for what is decreed shall be done. In other words, God wants this persecution to happen, and so that's why God's going to allow it until the time is right. Now, when God doesn't want it, he'll be done, and so will the persecution. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers. Now, this is really interesting. He not only insults the true and living God, he also insults the gods of his country. He has no care for either religion. Or the one who beloved by women. We believe that's a third god there. So there is the gods of his heritage, the gods that women loved, and the true and living God. He insulted them all. I could show you the history, but I'm going to try to keep moving so we get through chapter 12. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of a fortress instead of these. What does that mean? Honor the God of a fortress. What did he care about? What was his only thing? War, power, strength. He didn't even care about his family's gods or his homeland's gods. He cared about might makes right. A God whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses, with the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him he shall load with honor, and he shall make them rulers over many, and shall divide the land for a price. Selling it to the highest bidder, and if you flatter him, he loves you. Both those things were found in history. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, with many ships. He shall come into the countries and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land, and tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand: Edom and Moab and the main part of the Ammonites. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and of silver and of precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Cushites shall fall in his train. But news from the east and the north shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction, and he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. We talked about that earlier in the book. When he finally does die, he dies mostly because of a rumor. He hears rumors that aren't true, goes running back home, and dies. According to Jewish tradition, he dies from miraculous hand of God. And he even admits that he shouldn't have treated God's people during his death. That's Jewish history. Don't know if it's true. But he died because of rumors. Some might call that an anxiety attack or a heart attack, or we don't know exactly what method it was, but stress from rumors that weren't necessarily true. All right, I hated to hurry through that, but I don't want to not get to chapter 12 because we're going to move on. All right. Years and years ago, I did not get a good answer on what chapter 12 was about from my master's professor, and I thought I was going to do so much better for y'all, and the more I studied, the more I keep going. We could disagree on this chapter, and that's okay. So here's the main point of, if you don't understand anything from chapter 10 and 11, here's the main point. Chapter 11 and 12, here's the main point. Trust in God. Keep the hope or faith. It'll be worth it in the end. Same thing as Revelation, same thing as Daniel. If you don't understand anything else, understand that with God you can make it through whatever you're suffering. I had AI draw this up, and the first 15 times it used letters that aren't even in the English alphabet, but I think it did a pretty good job this time. Here are the three main views that I would take. In your outline, I gave you 2 options originally. I didn't like that by the time I came to this week. Let me see what originally I'd given you. The end of time, struggles of Jews, or both. I have no belief where I'm sitting today, and you can ask me a week from now, but I have no belief that it could be the end of times. Now, that is taught by most people in denominational world. I don't think at all it's the end of time. I do think it's the struggle of Jews. The question is, which struggle of Jews? Is it Antiochus Epiphanes? That's where I'm probably sitting right now. Or is it talking about the struggle of Jews leading up until God destroyed them in 70 AD? Some people believe it could actually be both. This leads to, this is like a small type of this. And then there's a third option that it is talking about the Christian age. And some people try to combine all three. I struggle with that. I see where you could combine A and B. I had a really fun idea I'd come up with last week, that it was actually predicting Jesus's, how long his ministry lasted, and then from the time of his death until the time of his ascension into heaven. And if I'd presented that last week, I had a really cool way I'd figured all that out, and now I think I'm probably wrong a week later. So, so most likely my current view is it's probably also about Antiochus Epiphanes. Let's read chapter 12. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never been since there was a nation till that time. I mean, if we're thinking about the history of physical Israel, there's never been a worse time than Antiochus Epiphanes. And there shall be a time of trouble like there's never been until that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. That's why you could think it is end of times. But most of the chapter doesn't seem to be describing end of times. But if you died during persecution, do you not think that that also is going to include end of times, but it's not happening right then, right? Just like a Christian who died in 100 AD, he's getting promised the book of life. That doesn't mean that it's happening in 100 AD. So there's some phrases like that make it sound like it's the end of time, but just because we die for our faith doesn't mean we're being resurrected that day. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. But those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. This phrase, time of the end, it means end of an age. So, is this the end of Antiochus' age of punishing the Jews? 70 years of captivity, yada, yada, yada. Or is it the end of the Jewish age? Or is it both? I don't have the answer for you there. But you, Daniel, shut up the words until the end of the time. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold two others, one on the bank of the stream and one on the bank of the stream. Someone said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the stream, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? It's like even the celestial beings were going, we don't know. How long? You know, it's not just Daniel that's confused. Even the heavenly beings are asking, how long? Now, if that's a reference back to chapter 11, all the horrible things that Antiochus Epiphanes put them through, how long is it going to last? Then that would make sense with what we're about to hear. And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream. He raised his right hand and his left hand towards heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever that it shall be a time, times, and half a time. Now, prophetically, what is 3.5? What is 7? Perfect amount of time. What's 3.5? Not that long. It's shown oftentimes in the book of Revelation, when we were studying there, 3.5 just meant your persecution's not going to last forever. So how long is this guy going to get to harm us? Not forever. Now here's the fun thing with Antiochus Epiphanes. We talked about this several chapters back. He reigned literally over Jerusalem, mistreating them almost exactly 3.5 years. And from the time he mistreated them to the time they got to take back over the temple and restore the temple to start doing worship was almost exactly 3.5 years. Okay? Now here's where I was going with this last week, and I think I'm definitely wrong now, but Jesus also ministered for about 3.5 years. His ministry was about 3.5 years, so I was trying to make it all Jesus, but I don't know if I can. Antiochus Epiphanes did. And that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. Well, what's he been doing? He's been shattering God's people. He's been hurting them, and it's finally coming to an end. I heard, but I did not understand. And then I said, "Oh, my Lord, what shall the outcome of these things be?" And he said, "Go your way, Daniel." In other words, Daniel, you don't need to understand. It's not for your time period, it's for a future time period. For the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. Now, this reminds me a lot of how the book of Revelation ended. The book of Revelation ended saying, let the wicked keep acting wickedly and let the good keep acting good. And none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away. Now, see, to me, doesn't that sound like what Antiochus Epiphanes did? He stopped the the daily burnt offerings. From the time that the daily burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes it desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. 1,290 days is about 3.5 years. Blessed is he who awaits and arrives at 1,335 days. And you say, what's the difference in 1,290 days and 1,335 days? Well, literally, what's the difference? 45 days is the literal difference. We believe, if this is Antiochus Epiphanes, we believe that's the amount of time from when he left Jerusalem and they started back to the time he died. From his death till the time that worship is restored is 45 days. That's what we believe. That's where I was trying to go last week, because if it was 3.5, I'm pretty sure I'm wrong on this, but if Jesus' ministry was 3.5 years, well, what's 45 days later? That's almost exactly either the time he's going back to heaven or the time the church has started. But I don't think I'm right now. That's where I was thinking a week ago. But go your way to the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of days. Okay. Most likely this is probably still following the exact same theme of chapter 11. We left off with Antiochus Epiphanes, and he's having a vision saying, how long can he keep mistreating God's people? And the answer is 3.5 years, but just wait 45 more days after that and everything will be solved. The theme of the chapter, and there is no way you're going to go from verse 88 to verse 22. That's probably verse 8 to verse 22. The theme of the book, and especially when you get to end on a chapter that we don't fully understand, is pray and trust God. And over through this book, they lived in foreign countries. They went through difficulties. They went through persecution. But God is always there. Say a prayer. So there's what we're going to take away from Daniel. Daniel, number 1, throughout the book, tells us that God is involved even in foreign countries. But the main themes are trust Him, pray. Thank you for the study of Daniel with me.